أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فكثروا فيها الفساد وصب عليهم ربك صوت عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له ذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي.
برای خوشنودی امام زمانه بلندتر صلوات اللهم صل على محمد و آل محمد و عجل فرجهم. کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا، کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا، خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا، کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا، جیسے جیسے میرے غازی کا علم جھکتا گیا، جیسے جیسے میرے غازی کا علم جھکتا گیا، پشت میں حضرت شبیر کی بھی خم آیا، خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا، کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا، کربلا دیکھ لے اسلام بچانے کے لیے، کربلا دیکھ لے اسلام بچانے کے لیے، ساتھ کنبے کو لیے وارث آدم آیا، خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا، کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا، ظالموں اس کو تو دو بوند پلا دو پانی، ظالموں اس کو تو دو بوند پلا دو پانی، اب لبوں پر میرے بے شیر کے ہے خم آیا، اب لبوں پر میرے بے شیر کے ہے دم آیا، خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا، سارے موسم تو گزر جاتے ہیں آ کر، لیکن سارے موسم تو گزر جاتے ہیں آ کر، لیکن بس ہمیشہ کے لیے موسم ماتم آیا، خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا، چاند ریحان نظر آیا محرم کا ادھر، چاند ریحان نظر آیا محرم کا ادھر، خلد میں اشک میری آنکھ میں پیہم آیا، خون ٹپکتا ہوا، خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا، کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا، درود بھیجو محمد و آل محمد پر، اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد
والمحمد وآل محمد صلوات، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى فرجه. کرب و بلا نصیب سے جانا، نصیب ہو پھر لوٹ کے وہاں سے نانا، نصیب ہو کرب و بلا، ایسا در حسین پہ سجدہ ہو آخری، ایسا در حسین پہ سجدہ ہو آخری، پھر مجھ کو اپنا سر نہ اٹھانا نصیب ہو کرب و بلا نصیب سے جانا نصیب ہو پروردگار ٹھوکریں در کی کب تلک پروردگار ٹھوکریں در کی کب تلک کب مستقل نجف میں ٹھکانا نصیب ہو کرب و بلا اور جیسا ملا نصیب سے البنین کو جیسا ملا نصیب سے البنین کو اب کیا کسی کو ایسا گھرانہ نصیب ہو کرب و بلا آنکھوں کو جب بھی اشک بہانا نصیب ہو آنکھوں کو جب بھی اشک بہانا نصیب ہو آل نبی کے غم کا بہانا نصیب ہو کرب و بلا نصیب سے جانا نصیب ہو نصیب ہو ور محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد و آل محمد وعجل فرجهم الفاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في محكم كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لن يصيبنا إلا ما كتب الله لنا هو مولانا وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. The subject for tonight, inshallah, will be about the COVID-19 pandemic and the spiritual means and tools by which we may counter the effects of this pandemic. We know, for example, that in the past few months, 6 months or so, the world has actually faced a lot of hardship, not only in terms of the deaths caused by the pandemic, but also due to the financial problems, the economic problems. We know that travel has been affected, the manufacturing industries have been affected, tourism, food security, the medical industry has been affected, not to mention, of course, the health of many individuals who have caught this virus, this deadly virus. And even after recovering from it, we are told that many people have long-term effects, and it is detrimental to the health for even those who recover from it. And so we find that this is all on one hand. On the other hand, there have been people who had planned things this year. We know of many people who had travel plans, they had to cancel their travel plans. We know of individuals who had plans to get married and they had to postpone these plans. And so the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc in the lives of many individuals in this world, and it has actually shaken the globe. And this is a beautiful example of what the Arabs say, and in fact this is a saying in English as well: Al-abdu yudabbir wallahu yuqaddir. Man proposes, but God disposes. God is the one who is the final decision maker. So even when we have certain plans, it is Allah Azza wa Jal who enables our plans to succeed or to fail, depending on the situation and depending on what is good for us, which He and He alone knows. So it is something that we need to think about, and especially when we are in this situation where all over the world people are suffering due to this pandemic, there are certain things we need to remind ourselves. One thing for sure that we remember is that good health is a blessing of Allah Azza wa Jal, a blessing that many times we take for granted. You know, when we lose something, that is when we realize how important it was. And the saying goes, you don't miss the water until the well runs dry. And this is very true, especially when it comes to good health. Imam Ali alayhi salam has some beautiful sayings regarding this. He says, بادر شبابك قبل هرمك وصحتك قبل سقمك. He says, take advantage of your youth before your old age, and your health before your sickness. You need to take advantage of these things before they are lost. If you don't take advantage of your young age, when you grow old, all you have is regret. And if you don't take advantage of your good health to do things while you are healthy, then once you become sick, then again all you are left with is regret. Similarly, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, صحة الأجسام من أهنأ الأقسام. Physical health is one of the most wholesome bounties and blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal. We don't realize it. It is only when we lose our health or when our health is in jeopardy that we tend to think about how valuable good health is. And that is why we find even when people are very rich, they are willing to give up all their wealth to secure good health and to become well again if they become sick. Meaning that health is a blessing that is even greater than wealth. A person is ready to give up his or her wealth just in order to secure their health. And so we need to remind ourselves of this blessing, and what better time to remind ourselves than during this pandemic, when our health is in constant danger and we never know when or if or how we would contract this virus. Those of us who know friends and family members who contracted this virus and who underwent the very painful process of recovering from it tell us that they have no clue how they caught the virus. They were wearing their masks and they were taking precautions. It's just one small error that can cause one to be infected. And so we, in this situation where the future is unknown, have to constantly remind ourselves of the blessing of good health and thank Allah Azza wa Jal for this blessing. One thing that we do realize from this pandemic is that indeed there are individuals who, especially those who are agnostics or atheists or weak believers, tend to give so much credence to science, and they tend to feel science even supersedes religion. Science is the yardstick of all that is true in the world. But when we saw what science could do for us, or rather what it could not do for us when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic, we realized that science as it stands today is not really the elixir of every problem that we may face or the solution of all our difficulties in the world. Science is not the go-to, because at the end of the day, when we look at what science and scientists did when the COVID pandemic broke out, I mean, in the beginning, they began saying that, look, this is not airborne, so don't worry about it. It is just something that transfers through bodily fluids, especially through cough and through sneezes. So all you need to do is keep away from those people who have fever and who are coughing and have these symptoms, and that's it. Now they tell us, no, there is airborne virus as well. Similarly, in the beginning, they said there is no need to wear a mask for those who are not infected. Now they say everyone should wear a mask. Then they try to tell us in the beginning that it doesn't affect children under a certain age. Now they say even children get infected. And so you find that science, despite all its progress, with all the technology and the scientific advancements we have in the world today, still they could not come up with a final. And even today we find conflicting reports, things coming and going, wear this, don't wear this, eat this, don't eat this, and so on and so forth. So scientists have not been able to provide any firm, established, incontrovertible proof or details about the COVID-19 virus. So we are just following them like sheep. One day we wear the mask, one day we don't wear the mask, depending on what the WHO tells us, what the scientists tell us. And of course we respect science and scientists. Islam is all for science, and inshallah we'll have a separate discussion on the compatibility between Islam and science, inshallah ta'ala, in one of these nights. However, we must realize that it is not that utopian ideal which people make it out to be, that science, as the way many atheists like Richard Dawkins and others try to portray it to be, the only yardstick for any truth in the world. This is not the case. I mean, if it could not and still cannot tell us what we basically and fundamentally need to know about a simple virus, What can it tell us about how the world was created and how man was created and so on and so forth? These are all speculations, yes, based on some flimsy evidence now and then, but again, it is not something that is set in stone, and it can change as it commonly does. Now, when we look at the pandemic, we find that this is not the first time that humanity has faced such a pandemic, that humanity has faced such whole scale or large scale viruses or diseases. We know about the plague, the bubonic plague, that has caused havoc in human history and killed millions of people in the past. And there's a very interesting work which I would recommend to anyone who has the time. A journal of the plague year by Daniel Defoe. A journal of the plague year by Daniel Defoe, published in 1722. It's written in kind of Middle English, and I would recommend listening to it. The audiobook is also available rather than reading it, because the narrator of the audiobook has done an exceptionally good job in portraying and even depicting the ideas behind the words of Daniel Defoe. In this book, we are told of how the bubonic plague, which struck the city of London in 1665, how it killed so many people and completely shook the economy of the great city of London. And it is very important because some of the things mentioned in this book about the plague actually do ring true about the COVID-19 virus as well. For example, it talks about the waves, the first wave and the second wave, or the first phase and the second phase, and actually the third phase as well. And I remember discussing with my wife about the COVID-19 pandemic, while we here in the city of Qom were probably the first or the second to be hit by this virus before the rest of the world actually saw the virus. We were discussing about it, and I say that, look here, it seems that this is going to have a second and third wave as well. And now we see we are in the second wave, which, as Defoe mentions in his book, when the plague struck London in 1665, the second wave actually killed off more people than the first. Why? Because when the first wave finally came to an end, people thought that the plague had ended, and they were rejoicing and coming out in droves. And when people came out in droves and the plague was still there, it actually spread faster amongst them, and more people were infected and more people died. And this is what happened also here and many parts of the world that are currently in the second phase, where people thought now things are getting better, life is getting back to normal, and they came out, and now more people are infected, more people are dying. So this is something that we can learn from the past. These kinds of things have happened in the past, and we should learn from our history. Now, the beauty of our times is that we have the technology. See, I am sitting here in the city of Qom from my own home and recording this, which will inshallah be playing on your screens on the second night of Muharram al-Haram, inshallah. And while we are doing this, we don't realize another problem that is slowly growing, and that is our deep attachment to technology. Technology is good. There is no doubt about it. I mean, it has made life a lot easier for us. But there are problems when it comes to technology. Every technological advancement that we see in our lives has a negative that comes along with the positive. And many times we don't realize the negative until it is too late, or we realize it, after a long period of time. And this is something that has always been the case, even when writing first became popular. There is an interesting quotation from Socrates, the Greek philosopher, about writing. He says, "And now, since you are the father of writing, your affection for it has made you describe its effects as the opposite of what they really are. In fact, it will introduce forgetfulness into the soul of those who learn it. They will not practice using their memory because they will put their trust in writing, which is external and depends on signs that belong to others, instead of trying to remember from the inside completely on their own. You have not discovered a portion of remembering, but of reminding. You provide your students with the appearance of wisdom, not with its reality. Your invention will enable them to hear many things without being properly taught, and they will imagine that they have come to know, while for the most part they will know nothing. And they will be difficult to get along with, since they will merely appear to be wise instead of actually being so." This is a quotation from Socrates, where he actually says that the invention of writing has a detrimental effect on students because now they will not commit things to memory. Of course, Islam promotes the idea of writing, where we have some narrations where we are told, قَيِّدُ الْعِلْمَ بِالْكِتَابِ, bind your knowledge by writing, because human beings are prone to forget. But of course, even here, there is something true in the words of Socrates, where too much reliance on writing and reading and books makes one dependent on them. Then you no longer have things in memory. Imagine a situation where you didn't have your internet, where you didn't have your computer, where you didn't have your iPad, where you didn't have any access to your digital resources, to your notes. Would you remember these things? And even if you did remember, for how long would you remember these things? And so this is just one small example of how technology has its cons. Many times we look at the pros of technology and we don't think about its cons. Now, while we're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to look at the Islamic spiritual reactions to the COVID-19 and how we can use the teachings of Islam to enable us to keep our spirits high and to keep our hope alive during these very trying times. So the first prescription that we can look at that Islam advises us, the spiritual prescription of dhikrullah, remembrance of Allah Azza wa Jal. For indeed, this is one of the times when people would remember Allah Azza wa Jal. When people are in a state where they no longer have control of their lives and they see things are happening that are beyond their control, that is when they realize that the one who is in control is none other than Allah Azza wa Jal. There's a beautiful ayah in the Holy Quran in Surah Yunus where Allah Azza wa Jal depicts how human beings behave in such situations. He says, هو الذي يسيركم في البر والبحر حتى إذا كنتم في الفلك وجرينا بهم بريح طيبة وفرحوا بها جاءتها ريح عاصف وجاءهم الموج من كل مكان وظنوا أنهم أحيط بهم دعوا الله مخلصين له الدين لئن أنجيتنا من هذه لنكونن من الشاكرين فلما أنجاهم إذا هم يبغون في الأرض بغير الحق. And the ayah continues. We find that Allah Azza wa Jal tells us it is He who carries you across land and sea when you are in the ships and they sail along with them with a favorable wind, exulting in it. There comes upon them a tempestuous wind, and waves assail them from every side. And they think that they are besieged, At that moment, they invoke Allah, putting exclusive faith in Him. If you deliver us from this, we will surely be amongst the grateful. But when He delivers them, behold, they commit violations on the earth unduly. This is the state of human beings. When human beings find themselves in a situation where they cannot control their fate, then they turn to Allah Azza wa Jal. And only when the problem is alleviated and they feel secure, then they turn back to themselves and they forget Allah Azza wa Jal. The remembrance of Allah is something that has been emphasized in Islam and in the Holy Quran time and time again. It is not something that has to be done once in a while. Rather, it is something that has to be done constantly. The Holy Quran tells us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dhkurullaha dhikran kathira. O you who have faith, remember Allah with a frequent remembrance. Those who are wise and those who are believers are described as individuals who constantly remember Allah Azza wa Jal. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. Those who remember Allah standing and sitting and lying on their sides and reflect upon the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal in the heavens and the earth, saying, Our Lord, you have not created all this in vain. Immaculate are you. Save us from the punishment of the fire. So the remembrance of Allah is so great, and Imam As-Sajjad alayhi salam says, Astaghfiruka min kulli ladhatin bighayri dhikrik. O Allah, I seek forgiveness from you from every ladha, from every pleasure that I enjoy, bighayri dhikrik, without remembering you. Remembrance of Allah not only during hardship, but even during times of joy, of pleasure, of happiness. This is what Islam teaches us. Of course, when it comes to dhikr of Allah, to remembering Allah Azza wa Jal, there are three types of dhikr the scholars mention. The first is dhikr lafzi, the dhikr of Allah, the remembrance of Allah that is done by the tongue, where you say, for example, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. This is dhikr lafzi. The second type of dhikr that is mentioned by the scholars is dhikr qalbi, the dhikr of Allah which is done in the heart, where your heart is constantly thinking of Allah. Of course, when we talk about the heart in Islamic terminology, it includes the mind, the consciousness of a human being, meaning you are constantly thinking of Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah is in your mind and you are doing His dhikr, you are thinking about Him. This is the second type of dhikr. But the third type of dhikr that some scholars mention is the dhikr that includes action, which is known as at-takhalluq bi asma'illah, where you actually try and imbibe and ingrain within yourself and inculcate within yourself the qualities of Allah Azza wa Jal that are mentioned in His beautiful names. For example, when you say, Ya Ghaffaru, Ya Ghaffaru, Ya Ghaffaru, O one who forgives, O one who pardons. And you now want to become a manifestation of this. When somebody wrongs you, then you should pardon that person. You should forgive that person. Then you become a manifestation of that name of Allah Azza wa Jal. Ya Ghaffar. Ghaffar, the one who forgives, who oft forgives. Then you have, for example, Ya Sattaru, Ya Sattar. Oh, He who hides. Hides what? Hides my flaws. Hides my mistakes. hides my faults, hides my sins, so that people don't know about them. Oh Allah, you know about them. If you are saying Ya Sattar, Ya Sattar, and now you come to know about the faults of your fellow believers and you expose their faults, then you are not following that takhalluq, that following and manifesting the actual attributes that you are mentioning in your dhikr. So the higher form is where you actually follow and emulate Allah Azza wa Jal in your own little way, in your own capacity, to do as Allah does. If Allah hides my faults, I will hide the faults of my fellow believers. And of course, this third type of dhikr is said to be the highest form of dhikr, higher than even the dhikr of the angels. We know that the angels do dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal, and one of the things that human beings are capable of that angels are not is that kind of manifestation of the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal. And that is what scholars tell us about dhikr. Of course, there are different kinds of dhikr, and according to some scholars, one of the best adhkar is salawat on the Holy Prophet and his progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Now, when we talk about dhikr, and especially since we are reminding ourselves that this is one of the ways in which we can counter the negative psychological effects of the COVID pandemic, is the benefit of tranquility. We know dhikr has many benefits. The benefit of tranquility in one's heart. The Quran tells us, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُم بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. Those who have faith and whose hearts find rest in the remembrance of Allah, indeed the hearts find tranquility in Allah's remembrance. So in this time of stress, of pressure, of difficulty, of depression even sometimes, some people who are stuck in their houses and are unable to come out, or whose businesses have gone down due to this problem, they really have a sense of hopelessness that pervades their lives during such a time. But if you remember Allah, it brings tranquility, it brings tuma'anina in the hearts. So this is the first benefit of dhikrullah. The second benefit of remembering Allah during these times, and in fact during all times, is that when you remember Allah, He showers you with His special grace. Allah says in the Quran, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. Remember me and I will remember you, and thank me, do not be ungrateful to me. So this is something that we learn from dhikr. The second benefit of dhikr is that Allah says, you remember me, I will remember you. Of course, this does not mean that at other times Allah forgets you. Rather, it means that there is a special grace and bounty of Allah Azza wa Jal upon you when you remember Him through dhikr. The third benefit is that through dhikr, legitimate desires are fulfilled. If you have a desire in your heart, when you constantly remember Allah, Allah fulfills your desires. It is said there was a man known as Sheikh Ahmad about 1,000 years ago, a very famous sheikh in his town. Now, it so happened that Sheikh Ahmad one day was traveling to a different city, and he went to that city, and when he arrived there, it was night time and he did not have anyone there whom he knew. So he proceeded to the masjid, thinking that that would be a place where he could rest for a while and at the same time perform some worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. But when he went into the masjid, the caretaker of the masjid did not recognize who he was, did not know him, and he told him, at the moment the masjid is closed for cleaning purposes or for some other reason, please leave. He tried to sit in the sahan of the masjid, but again the same caretaker came and told him to leave. Now, this Sheikh Ahmad did not know anyone in the town, so he began walking, and it was night time and most of the people were at home. He found one baker's shop open, and so he entered that shop, and he found a pious young man doing the dhikr of Allah and baking. Sheikh Ahmad was very impressed by the young man, and he struck up a conversation with the young man, and he asked the young man about his life and what are his desires and his aspirations, what did he want to do with his life. And the young man said, Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed me with everything. I am content with what Allah has given me. I have one desire, however. In the neighboring town there is a sheikh known as Sheikh Ahmad. I really wanted to meet him one day, and that is my dua, inshallah. Allah will bless me one day that I will be able to meet Sheikh Ahmad. Sheikh Ahmad was taken aback, and he said, actually I am Sheikh Ahmad, and Allah Azza wa Jal has arranged it such that I found no other place to come to except your bakery, and I am here, and it is as if Allah Azza wa Jal has granted your request. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So the dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal is one of the things that we can do during this period that can help us come out of any slump we find ourselves in spiritually or psychologically. The second thing that we can offer as a prescription, as a spiritual prescription for these times, is at-tawakkul ala Allah, which means putting your trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. What is tawakkul? This is a very interesting question that, in fact, according to the narrations, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alih had actually asked Jibreel about. He said, "Mat tawakkul ala Allah?" And Jibreel replied, "Al-ilmu bi anna al-makhluqa la yadurru wa la yanfa' wa la yu'ti wa la yamna'." Jibreel replied the Holy Prophet and said, Tawakkul means that you should know in your heart that a creation of Allah does not have the power to harm you or to benefit you, to give you or to deprive you. It is only Allah Azza wa Jal who has the ultimate power to do that. Once you know that Allah is the one who has the power to do that, then you have complete trust in Allah. When you trust Allah completely, then that is something that will enable you to face any hardship. If you are currently struggling during these times, put your trust in Allah, put your faith in Allah. Know that nothing can harm you if Allah is protecting you. Nothing can take away from you if Allah wants to give you. This is something very important. And so when you're talking about tawakkul, it is important for us to realize that Allah Azza wa Jal is the all-powerful, and He is the one who can protect us when no one else can. There is an anecdote about a trader who used to always trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. In fact, the level of his tawakkul was so great that his wealth was never stolen. No thieves or robbers ever took any of his wealth. He had many friends who had been attacked by thieves and robbers, but he had never faced this problem. And many of his friends were jealous of him, that how come this friend of ours has never had a problem where a thief has come to take his wealth, or he has been robbed on the highway, or he has been mugged by anyone. What's the story behind this, And so one day while they were traveling on a business trip, they decided to play a prank on their friend. And so they took his pouch of coins and they dug a hole and they put it in the ground and they covered it up while he was sleeping. They did this so that when he awoke, they had decided that they will say a thief had come and taken his wealth. Now it just so happened that that night thieves actually did come to their camp, and they stole the wealth of everyone who was there except the wealth of that individual that had been buried in the ground. And when he woke up the next morning, everyone else had their wealth stolen while his was safe. This is an example of tawakkul and the effects of tawakkul. If Allah Azza wa Jal wants to keep you safe, nothing can harm you. When you have complete faith in Allah Azza wa Jal, then that gives you the strength to face any difficulty, because you know that everything that happens is in the hands of Allah Azza wa Jal, and you rely completely upon Him. So that is the second prescription. The third prescription we want to give for these times of the pandemic is ar-rida biqada'illah, meaning being satisfied with the decree of Allah Azza wa Jal. When you have a satisfaction in your heart that whatever Allah has decreed for you is for your benefit, then you are at ease. You are not going to be a person who worries about what happens to you which is beyond your control, because you know that Allah has decreed that thing for you. So for example, the Quran is very explicit when it says, قُلْ لَن يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا هُوَ مَوْلَانَا وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Say, nothing will befall us except what Allah has decreed for us. He is our master and we have complete trust in Him. Meaning that even if you do fall sick during these times, even if you do suffer from this pandemic, or even if you have a family member who has suffered from this pandemic, or a friend or a colleague, and you see them facing hard times, know that Allah Azza wa Jal has decreed this, and be satisfied with it. You know that when a person is sick, the riwayat tell us that their sins are being forgiven. You know that Allah Azza wa Jal will only do to you what is good for you. And sometimes even when we find something to be distasteful, it is for our own benefit. During the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih, when the prescription for war came, many people were unhappy about it. You know, Muslims did not fight for the first 13-14 years of Islam. When the Holy Prophet brought Islam, they were in Mecca for 13 years, where there was no war fought. When they came to Medina for the first year, there was no war. It was in the second year after the Hijrah when the battles began and the prescription for fighting came. And many were unhappy about it. But Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Holy Quran, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. War has been prescribed for you, although it is repulsive to you. You don't like it. But it may be that you dislike something that is good for you, and you may like something that is bad for you. It is Allah who knows, and you do not know. It is like giving that injection to the young child who feels that you are hurting him, you are doing something bad, but you know that it is the injection that might save his life. Similarly, Allah Azza wa Jal prescribes certain things. He makes certain things happen to you in your life. If you are satisfied with what He decrees and you are happy with His decree, then you will have that sense of tranquility in your heart, because you trust in Allah Azza wa Jal and you know that He will do only what is good for you. And that is why the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi would never be heard uttering the words لَوْ كَانَ غَيْرُهُ, meaning, ay kash, oh how I wish, oh how I wish this would have happened or that would have happened. If only this could have happened. He never ever uttered those words. So rida is the third prescription that we need to remind ourselves of during these times. Ar-rida biqada'illah. And the fourth and final prescription that we mention quickly in passing is the prescription of patience, sabr. Sabr is so important that according to the riwayat we have been told that as-sabru min al-iman bimanzilat al-ra's min al-jasad. The status of sabr and patience to iman, to faith, is like the head to the body. فَإِذَا ذَهَبَ الرَّأْسُ ذَهَبَ الْجَسَدِ. If the head is detached from the body is no more. كَذَلِكَ إذا ذهب الصبر ذهب الإيمان. Similarly, if patience is removed, then faith is no more. You want to be a faithful believer, then you must have patience. This is something very important. And many times we find that we question, how is it that Allah Azza wa Jal is giving so much hardship to some people, while other people are enjoying their lives, and it is as if they are not suffering any hardship? This is because of our lack of knowledge. We don't understand. A beautiful hadith tells us that إن الله تبارك وتعالى ينزل الصبر على قدر شدة البلاء. Allah Azza wa Jal sends down sabr to the extent of the difficulty that one has to bear. This is very important. So sometimes we, looking from the outside, see certain people suffering and we feel, oh, how much they are suffering. How come we are having it easy and they are having it rough? Or we look at the world and we find different individuals, some having an easy quote unquote life while others are suffering. This is something that we see and we perceive, but we do not understand. Because the hadith tells us Allah sends down sabr with the bala. If He sends a hardship to you, He sends it along with the ability to bear it with patience. He sends the patience down with it. And therefore, sabr is one of the spiritual tools that we can use to keep ourselves uplifted spiritually, psychologically during these times of hardship, insha'Allah ta'ala. So we remind ourselves of these 4 prescriptions that can help us during these times. The first is dhikrullah, remembrance of Allah. Remember Allah at all times. The second is at-tawakkul ala Allah, trusting in Allah. Keep your trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. The third is ar-rida bi qada'illah, being satisfied with Allah's decree. Whatever Allah has decreed for you is for your own good. And fourth and finally, sabr, patience. Have patience and Allah Azza wa Jal will, insha'Allah, help you through these difficult times. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. We now turn to the Masa'ib of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam. Tonight we want to talk about how the Imam departs from Medina, the city of his grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih. We find that the narrations tell us that before the Imam departs Medina, he goes and bids farewell to his grandfather Rasulullah. And when he goes to Masjid al-Nabawi and he bids farewell to Rasulullah, he sees Rasulullah in a vision, and Rasulullah tells him about what he should prepare himself for. And he tells his grandfather, "Oh grandfather, I feel very upset and very sad that I have to leave you." But Rasulullah assures him and tells him that soon you will be with me, O my grandson. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam then proceeds to Baqi'. He bids farewell to his mother al-Zahra alayha salam and his brother Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. And as he finishes bidding farewell, then he comes and he goes to the house of Salama, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih. He knocks on her door. It is the dark of night, and Salama thinks to herself, who could it be at this time of night? She asks, who is at the door? He says, I am Hussein, O grandmother. Immediately she is worried. Why has my grandson come at this time? She quickly opens the door, and we find that we are told in the narrations that when she sees Aba Abdullah comes to bid farewell to her. He says, "Oh grandmother, I have come to bid my final farewell to you. We will not meet any longer in this world. I am leaving Medina." One account tells us that Salama is very upset. She says, "Oh my grandson, how will I know that you are safe?" And we are told that Imam al-Hussein gave her a small bottle with some sand in it. He said, "Oh grandmother, keep this sand with you. The day you see this sand turn to blood, then know that your Hussein is no more." It is said Salama would keep that sand with her, and every day after her salah, she would look at that sand, and when she saw that it was still sand, she would thank Allah. "Oh Allah, my Hussein is still safe." But the day came when she saw the sand and it had turned to blood. Allahu Akbar, that was the day of Ashura. Imam al-Hussein then, after bidding farewell to everyone, now he comes home and he tells all the family members that we are leaving, get ready. And one after the other, the women of the Ahlul Bayt are taken upon the mahmil. You should have seen that sight as the ladies of the Ahlul Bayt came forward. One by one, the youth would come and help them onto the mahmil. Zainab alayha salam was helped by Abbas. Kulthum was helped by Ali Akbar, and this is how they left. But oh, look at how they come back to Medina. When they come back to Medina, their state is such that Kulthum recites, "Medina to Jaddina la taqbalina." Oh, the city of my grandfather, do not accept us back. Look at that state in which they return back to Medina. Ajrukum ala Allah, ajrukum ala Allah. Now the Imam alayhi salam proceeds towards Mecca. He is going towards Mecca. As he goes to Mecca and he reaches there, the Imam then decides to stay there in Mecca until the time of Hajj. That is 4 months, a little over 4 months. The Imam is there in Mecca telling the people about his message, explaining to them. And as he is in Mecca, he receives thousands of letters from Kufa. When the message reaches Kufa that the Imam has left Medina, he is in Mecca, and he has not given bay'ah to Yazid, the Kufans begin to write these letters, and in their thousands they invite the Imam to Kufa. And they tell the Imam, "Come to us, Yabna Rasulillah, we are willing to pledge our allegiance to you." The Imam alayhi salam sends his brother Muslim ibn Aqil to Kufa to investigate about the situation and get back to him. In the meantime, when Yazid learns that the Imam is in Mecca, he sends his henchmen to come and assassinate the Imam during Tawaf. When the Imam hears that this is what they had planned, he leaves the sanctuary of Mecca and he proceeds towards Kufa. But on the way to Kufa, he receives the message about the martyrdom of Muslim ibn Aqil. And at that moment, when he hears about what had happened to Muslim ibn Aqil, the Imam called Zainab, "Zainab, bring to me the daughter of Muslim." Muslim had a young daughter, a small child. She came to the Imam. The Imam made her sit on his lap. The Imam stroked her hair, and the Imam began uttering words of kindness to her. She was from the Ahlul Bayt. Immediately she realized something is wrong. She said, "Oh my uncle, has my father died? Because you are treating me the way orphans are treated." Ajrukum ala Allah. I will say, I hope Sakina does not see this, because then she will think that all orphans are to be treated like this. She does not know what is waiting for her on the day of Ashura. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون.
बिन्ते अली ने मुझको चादर बना लिया है, मैं खाके करबला हूँ, रुतबा मेरा जुदा है, मैं खाके करबला हूँ, रुतबा मेरा जुदा है। बिन्ते अली ने मुझको चादर बना लिया है, मैं खाके करबला हूँ, رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. کرتی ہے رشک مجھ پر کوثر کے بھی کنارے، زینب کے سر میں نے 2 سال ہیں گزارے. میرا ہر ایک ذرہ ہر ظلم کا گواہ ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، با میرا جدا ہے. اکبر جوان قاسم غازی سے چاند تارے، زین الایمان میری آگوش میں اتارے. یعنی لہو نبی کا مجھ میں ملا ہوا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا. روتی ہوں یاد کر کے وہ بے کسی کا منظر، مولا چھپا رہے تھے مجھ میں وہ لاش اصغر. اس دن سے آج تک نہ مجھ کو سکون ملا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. شہدائے کربلا کی زخموں کو میں نے چوما، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کے قدموں کو میں نے چوما. اس واسطے ہی میری تاثیر میں شفا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ جدا ہے. اکبر کی لاش پر جب شبیر جا رہے تھے، اٹھتی تھی بیٹھتی تھی اور لڑکھڑا رہے تھے. منظر وہ ابھی میری آنکھوں میں پھر رہا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. اے زائرین مولا چلنا یہاں سنبھل کر، قرآن فاطمہ کا بکھرا ہوا ہے مجھ پر. نہ جانے کس جگہ پر کس کا لہو گرا ہے. میں خاک کربلا ہوں، رتبہ میرا جدا ہے. یا حسین.
زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ. روتی ہوئی بازار سے، روتی ہوئی بازار سے دربار میں جانا، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ. حق تاکردہ دیتے مگر وہ بھی نہیں دی، دربار میں زہرا کی طرح جب تو گئی تھی، افسوس تیرا رتبہ، افسوس تیرا رتبہ بھی لوگوں نے نہ جانا، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، وہ جلتے ہوئے خیمے، وہ پیاسوں کی صدائیں، خاموشی پہ وہ درے، وہ رونے پہ جفائیں، تب دست ستمگار سے، تب دست ستمگار سے وہ بچوں کو بچانا، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، پردے میں کنیزیں ہے، سرے بزم ہے زینب، دربار میں رو رو کے یہی کہتی تھی زینب، امت کا تیری کیسا، امت کا تیری کیسا ہے انصاف یہ نانا، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، جس بی بی کا سایہ بھی نہ دیکھا تھا کسی نے، وہ بھیڑ میں لوگوں کی رسن بستہ کھڑی ہے، اور کہتی ہے فضا سے، اور کہتی ہے فضا سے کہ غازی کو بلانا، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، سجاد لہو روتا رہا شام میں ہر دم، پردوں کا وہ غم اس پہ قیامت سے نہ تھا کم، عابد کا وہ غم ہو کے، عابد کا وہ غم ہو کے ہی بازار سے جانا، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، ہے مقصد تخلیق صاحب اپنا زاگی، ماتم کا بچھے فرش جہاں بھی کبھی موشی، تب نوحہ وہاں پیاسوں، تب نوحہ وہاں پیاسوں کی غربت کا سنانا، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، زینب کی غریبی کو نہ بھولے گا زمانہ، نہ بھولے گا زمانہ۔
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيد نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. وعلى الأرواح التي حل بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر عهد مني زيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا أمة المسلمين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي. السلام عليك يا ساب الأرض والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعب الإيمان. أنشر الله فرجه وسخر الله مخرجه وظهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته.